states and now. Since its release, this game has only received one patch, showing that Arkane most likely is just giving up on it. Oh, looks like Redfall got a substantial update. Well, it's been a little more than a month since I last spoke about this disastrous, barely functional, uber boring game that is Arkane Studios' Redfall. And honestly, for good reason. The game was mediocre at best, and at its core foundation, just wasn't fun. And given the fact that Arkane went completely silent after releasing the game, I didn't think I'd ever be talking about it again. But to everyone's surprise, on October 6, Arkane Studios released a huge mega patch that added new options such as a performance mode for consoles, enhanced controller settings, and even stealth takedowns. What? But besides those much needed additions, we also got fixes to performance and gameplay issues, menu fixes, stability changes, and just overall improvement of quality of life. Seems like they wanted to do a lot. If you haven't checked out my original video on Redfall, I'd recommend you check it out just so you have a better comparison as to where this game was a month ago compared to where it is now. Since my memory was still fresh though coming into this, I decided the best way to see for myself how all these changes truly affected the game was to just beat it all over again. And this time around, not only did I beat the game solo, but I also went out of my way to make it pretty far with friends, all in an effort to really give this game every chance it could to shine. And coming back into it, I couldn't say I was super ecstatic about making this video. But I had to know, did this update actually make the game playable? Is it fun now? Is it better? Is Redfall actually worth checking out? Or is the game still as broken as the day it was released? Well, to put it simply, all of that is hard to explain. Cause while Redfall does have its really cool moments, Lord knows this game still has plenty of issues. I'll be honest. This game was a lot more enjoyable the second time around compared to the first, and it's definitely because of all these changes Arkane made to the game. I was able to really mess around with my controller settings, and for the first time this game actually felt playable. I would even argue that the controls felt great. Locking on to enemies felt easier, the gunplay was smoother, headshots more satisfying. I remember on my first playthrough I almost dreaded getting into gunfights, while now I didn't mind as much. The addition of stealth takedowns was much needed, especially since I played a character like Jacob, a character that specializes at being quiet and taking on enemies unseen. With how I like to play games, I was able to turn Redfall into a diet Dishonored with how much easier it was to navigate these areas, take down enemies without other enemies knowing, and using Jacob's toolkit to stick to the shadows. That simple addition of being able to stealth take down enemies alongside small gameplay changes made it so much easier to play this game the way I wanted to play it. There were definitely a few times I struggled with the game, mainly with the late game special vampires, but when I ended up playing with friends, those issues became nullified because I had someone to res me and take the aggro off me. If there's another thing I noticed on my second playthrough that was much needed with this update, is that the towns of Redfall was way more active and crowded compared to my first run. When I first played the game, shy of mission areas and very few spots on the map, it was rare to just run into enemies, let alone anything that wasn't just a common minion roaming the streets. But this time around, it felt like I was always running into something. Whether it was special vampires that normally don't get introduced until much later in the game, or actual events that were just happening in the streets, which was really surprising. Hell man, when I started that playthrough with a couple of friends, we ran into a siphon almost immediately. And I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to see that till the second area, so seeing that so early and fighting that with friends was fun. Like, it may sound dumb, but I thought this was such a cool change compared to how barren all this used to be. It gives me something to look forward to when I'm roaming around. Another simple change that I'm glad they added was now historical markers are visible from the moment you start the game. Historical markers are essentially fast travel locations you unlock by getting super close to these stones scattered around the map and interacting with them. It sounds kind of silly that I was excited for that, but in my first playthrough, you have no clue as to where any of these are and only get some kind of indication to them when you're within 30 feet of them. This game relies so heavily on fast travel, you could not imagine how much of a godsend this is. But at the end of the day, with all these phenomenal changes, big and small, the game is still Redfall, and these changes can only do so much to the core experience. Let me explain that. Some of the main issues that persisted with Redfall on my first playthrough still carried over on my second, cause that's just how the game is. For example, this game is still glitchy and has its bugs. I'll say I didn't notice as many bugs my second time around, but they're still here. One of the worst bugs I faced on this playthrough was I had this weird glitch where after completing a mission, it wouldn't let me fast travel anywhere. And it happened near the end game where they expect you to do a lot of running back and forth. Luckily, after 10 minutes of trying to get around it, I was able to just fix it by restarting the game. It's not the worst glitch as it isn't really game breaking, but it's still frustrating I had to restart my game just to resolve this issue. I've also constantly faced issues of mission markers not loading properly while playing, making it so I had to constantly open up my map and ping my next location instead of just following my compass. And that's not something I had to do my first time around and absolutely demolished my pacing this time. Still though, while I noticed that enemy AI has improved and that was one of their fixes, it's still far from being great, as I've had a bunch of moments where I could just stand in front of enemies and they'd kind of just freak out on what to do. And I'm playing on the second highest difficulty. I think the special vamps have the most notable improvements as they're ridiculously aggressive compared to how they used to be, which I don't mind, it's supposed to be like that. It is just a shame that the lesser minions don't carry that same level of improvement and aggression. Visually, I want to say this game looks better as it also performs better. My friend who's playing on console told me there's a noticeable difference in quality since the last time he played because he's able to play at 60 frames per second. But Redfall still struggles with certain texture issues and proper rendering at times. I don't recall running into anything super noticeably ugly compared to my first run. Sometimes this game still looks great, and other times it looks like a 360 game. You do what you want with that knowledge, as I know graphics aren't everything, but the biggest takeaway from that is that this game still has wavering quality in how it looks, and even with its improvements, still struggles here and there. In the end though, this game is still Redfall. Its core gameplay loop and foundation, while better, is still just alright. The general story is not interesting in the slightest, boss fights are whack, the cutscenes are still going to be this horrendous camera pans that are trash, and its overall gameplay loop is just not that rewarding. So if you're looking at this video in hopes of, oh my god, is Redfall good now? Is now the time to jump on it? Can me and my friends finally play this game and have a good time? Well, I'd say it just depends on you. The last time I played this game, I'd argue that everyone should stay away from it as it wasn't really playable. But Arkane did do something. I'd argue that now it is playable. And though it isn't the most polished game out there, if you can play it with a service like gamepass and grab a bunch of friends who can make any game entertaining, maybe you guys can find enjoyment out of it like I did. I would just recommend you keep your expectations low. This game is still nowhere near perfect, but I'm glad to see Arkane is doing what they can to try to fix it. And if they keep releasing massive updates like this and continue supporting this project, I can easily see this game having a turnaround in a couple of years. If 2 years from now they can fix this gameplay loop, add fast travel between both locations because getting locked out of the first area is fucking stupid, continue to improve performance, I don't know man, I can see it. It'll take a while, but I can definitely see a future for this game. But as to whether or not Arkane has completely made up for their mistakes, hell no. And should you give this game a shot, like I said, it's really up to you. I would just take into consideration what I said, and if this gameplay does not look interesting to you, then stay away from it. Enjoy the rest of the day, and take care.